So, we know that Battlefield 1 is getting a brand new melee combat system, redesigned from what is currently offered in the franchise, and it's said to complement the gritty, more brutal close quarters combat that was witnessed during World War I. Now, some of the weaponry used during this time was varied, to say the least, and I wanted to explore that in today's video. We're going to look at some of the melee weapons used during the war as to what we can expect to see in Battlefield 1. So first up, let's go in with the classic and well-known bayonet. In Battlefield 1, this will be attached to the end of your long rifle and will give your soldier the ability to go into a sort of focus charge animation which speeds up your movement and plunges the blade into an enemy. The Germans during the First World War produced more types of bayonets than anyone else, and they produced special adapters so that captured bayonets could be affixed to their own rifles like the Gewehr 98. The French Army's standard issue Rosalie bayonet was so long that there were many reports of these being cut down and fashioned into smaller hand blades for that hand-to-hand combat, and there still being enough blade on the rifle to act as a bayonet as well. The bayonet was really seen as a charging weapon. It wasn't something that you carried around with you and swiped people with. You would full-on charge your rifle straight into a soldier with it. And to try and make sure that these blades were as brutal as they possibly could, the Germans issued the sawback bayonet. Now you can see that on the screen right there. It's got some ridging in it, and that makes it absolutely lethal in combat. You would not want to come up against one of those. The advantage of having a bayonet over, say, a pistol is that in close quarters, you'd only end up hitting one target with the blade. If you fired a pistol and you missed the shot, you could hit one of your friendly soldiers, or you may even end up shooting through an enemy and hitting someone else by accident. So having a bayonet really made sure that you were going for the target you intended and not somebody else. Next, we have the Trench Club, and depending on which soldier you asked, they will tell you a different story about their own Trench Club, because they were pretty much all engineered in the trenches, finding what they could and putting things together and creating something from what they had. They weren't like standard issue like other weapons, they were really improvised with whatever they could find out there on the battlefield. Some great examples are this one here, which is made of a wooden handle and then has got some hobnails hammered into the end of it to give it a little bit more damage potential. And one here is actually the handle of the entrenching tool, which is built to fit a spade onto the end, but with the fitting at the top has been replaced with this kind of cog, which again makes it more lethal as the blunt metal edges are likely to hurt a lot more than just a stick of wood. The Trench Club really is the best example of the improvised weaponry that soldiers used during World War I. Soldiers would go looting destroyed houses that had been ripped apart by artillery fire. They'd take table legs and wrapped barbed wire around the end of it. They'd hollow out grenade shells and wedge those onto the end to give the club some weight and more surface area when striking the enemy. These short, lightweight clubs worked much better in hand-to-hand combat than the bayonets did, as stuck in the trenches, there wasn't really much space to move around, and having a long bayonet blade stuck on the end of your long rifle really didn't mean you could move very well. The clubs would be carried on the soldier at all times, and when storming enemy locations, they became a great tool to make a quick attack on the enemy. And because we've seen in the trailer, this German soldier is using his entrenching tool, or actually the spade, to smash that Allied soldier's face in, I think we can be pretty confident that there's a spade in multiplayer as well. It's said that many soldiers preferred using the spade as it had a really good weight to it, and they could sharpen the edges of it and do some serious damage if they made the right contact. Moving on from the clubs, we need to discuss the knives. These were, of course, another deadly weapon in close quarters combat, almost guaranteeing a kill if you got the stab in the right place. The knives used, of course, varied in shape and length, but a lot of them were used in conjunction with a barrage of explosives. And this was a tactic that was used by the Germans more often. Many soldiers worked out that throwing grenades over the top and into the trench they wanted to attack would leave the enemy scrambling to try and get out of its blast radius. As it was a trench, there wasn't much space to move around, and once you've thrown a few grenades in, heard the explosion, over the top you went with your knife and into the trench, ready to stab any survivors left from the blast. Many soldiers at the start of the war only really carried bolt-action rifles. Automatic weapons didn't really come into effect until the later part of the First World War, or at least ones that could be used by one person, things that were light enough to be able to be carried. And because bolt-action rifles do take a long time to reload and get the next round into the chamber, you would just go for your grenade and your knife, throw the grenade over into the top of the trench, hopefully get a few kills out of it, run over the top when told to, and go in with your knife, and you're likely to have killed more people that way than you would have with your long rifle. One of the most famous knives of that war is probably the standard issue American 1918 trench knife, which included brass knuckles integrated into the handle, and those in turn had small spikes shaped onto the top of them. This made it a particularly brutal weapon, as not only was it affixed to the soldier's hand and therefore harder to remove from them during combat, but the brass knuckles presented another way of injuring the enemy. There are, of course, many other types of weapons used during World War I. We even saw the swords used on horseback in the trailer. There are so many possibilities that DICE can explore, and here's to hoping they do a great job of bringing us some entertaining and interesting melee weapons to play with. All of them will have their own strengths and weaknesses too, so it'll be up to the player to decide what suits them best. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Drop me a like down below and leave me some comments as well. What melee weapons do you want to see in Battlefield 1? But until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.